too. So.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to Unprinted Pages with DH Dunn and Gregory D. Little. Join us as we talk about the writing world and how they became, well, basically their experiences. And I would like to introduce our guest, Greg D. Little. Please tell us a little bit about you.
I'm Gregory D. Little. I am a science fiction, fantasy, and horror writer. These days, mostly sci-fi. I have a fantasy series, Unwilling Souls, epic fantasy, and I'm currently working on I'm in the middle of a science fiction horror series, Mutagen Deception, and getting ready next year to start on a third series, science fiction murder mystery comedy called Belle Begrudgingly Solves It.
That is awesomeness.
I love that title.
This is DH Dunn. Tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, I'm DH Dunn. I am a fantasy adventure and gamelit author as well as a Twitch streamer. I have 10 self-published books out there, primarily the Fractured Evers series, and I have coming up here very soon a release from Shadow Alley Press, One More Turn, which is going to be a turn-based gamelet. And I stream on Twitch pretty much every night. And that's me.
And this is my co-host, Raz. Say hi, Raz.
How's it going, everybody? I'm just here.
Welcome to the show. And hold on a second. We see. Hey, Avatar fan! Thank you for coming.
Avatar fan, hello.
Hey, Avatar. Great to see you, love. Thanks for coming in.
And of course, he had answers. I love your emojis. They're awesome.
Thank you.
So,
It's the artist for the emojis is the same guy who did the overlays for Earth Dragon during the D&D.
And the heads don't pulse on here.
Yeah,
but
that's a good thing.
They have. And hello to everybody. And thank you to all the DH Dunn people and Greg people who came. Hi, sweetie.
Hey, man.
Okay. I think that's everybody. If not, we'll say hi then. Okay, guys. You guys have had very different experiences in publishing. And you both started out as self-published first, indie authors. What made you want to go from being an indie author to published by a publishing company?
Well, I'll start.
Age,
I know.
Age before wisdom.
Wait a minute. Nothing about that makes sense. You've completely thrown me off now. Yes, having done the self-publishing thing, the thing about self-publishing is you have control over everything. You make the final decisions on what goes into the text, what goes into the cover. Everything is up to you. You can outsource as much of that as you want to / can afford to do, but ultimately you make the call. Now, the flip side of that is it's all on you, and you have to make sure everything is up to snuff. The appealing thing about working with a publisher is that they take a lot of that load off of you, and you can focus more on the writing side, the editing side, the more pure, I guess, artistic side of things, and not deal as much with all the ancillary stuff that goes into making a book.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really solid answer. And to kind of build on it, I guess, it costs a lot more out of your own pocket to self-publish and odds are you're going to make less. So those are compelling reasons also. And, like working with Chris Dragonship, working with Shadow Alley, you're working with people who know how to do things. They've been doing these things for years that you're just like frantically watching YouTubes and stuff trying to figure out, well, how do you do keywords again? Like, so you try, you want to be the DIY guy who does everything, but and I think most people end up hybrid. It's not like I think I speak for Greg too. I didn't step through a door and say, okay, I'm never self-publishing again.
Right.
But rather, this was an opportunity. I'm not going to say no to it. They published this genre. I'm writing in this genre, so let's allow them to focus on the piece that they're good at, so that I can focus on the piece that I'm trying to be good at.
And there's an intangible factor to it too. I'm assuming that Dave feels the same about this, but for me at least, just having that sense that there's a team backing you up is a huge confidence boost. I know I've written way more confidently since I have Kelly as my editor, providing me very regular feedback saying, this is awesome, I love this is great. Whereas otherwise it's, it's mostly me saying, I think this is good, but maybe nobody else does.
Well, and part of the difference is, because Greg and I have worked with the same editors as self-publishers as well, is that when you're self-publishing, that editor, on some level, you're paying them.
Yeah.
So that means that they're somewhat inclined to tell you what you want to hear. Obviously, if they're good, they're not going to. But also, you could just not listen to them. You could just choose to say, yeah, no, I'm not cutting that scene. I like it. And with, a traditional publisher, you cannot do that. And while I don't think Kelly takes a dictatorial approach, it is good to have people in the room who might tell when you're going to drive off a cliff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always, every time I get an edit back from Kelly, I look it over, and she knows this, and have a tantrum, privately, a private, quiet little tantrum about all the stuff, about all the perfect, sublime things that I did that she's going to make me cut now. And then, you get over it and you look at it again, and, there's times where I will push back and we'll come to a compromise. But most of the time, the stuff that she wants me to change, when I actually go through and change it, I'm like, yes, it's much better now.
And that's so annoying.
It really is. Like, it's so irritating.
It's like the worst I told you so.
Yes.
You guys have picked two great publishing companies to put y'all's books out with. Shadow Alley Press and Cursed Dragonship they have great writers. They have great people on their staff. Cursed Dragonship, I have known them since 2018. And I know a little bit more about them. I'm just starting to learn more about Shadow Alley Press. How did you guys find them, or did they find you?
I will let Dave start this one.
Well, I mean, at a high level, the answer to all of these questions is going to be Superstars, because that is a writing conference that Greg and I have been going to for years, that the Cursed Dragonship people have been going to for years, the Shadow Alley people have been going to for years. Really, we knew both Kelly and Kevin and James and Jeanette from Shadow Alley when there was no Shadow Alley and when there was no Cursed Dragonship. Like, we've known them before all of this. Not as well as we know them now, but in the end, I ended up knowing Shadow Alley because I worked there. So I got a job there as the operations manager, and I did not walk in the door with my manuscript kind of like in my back pocket. I waited, about a year and a half until I had an idea that I thought made sense, and then I went through the same pitch process and everything that everyone else gets to. But that is how I ended up working with them. And I would love to work with Cursed Dragonship someday as well, if the stars align. Yeah,
it's like Dave said, at Superstars in 2019, I was catching a ride. That's a great conference because people who go to the conference will offer to drive you. If you fly into Denver, the conference is in Colorado Springs, and they will have carpools running every so often from Denver airport down to Colorado Springs, so you don't have to rent a car, which is nice. So I flew into Denver because it was cheaper and direct, and I caught a ride, and I happened to be sitting behind Kelly Lynn Colby in the van on the way down, and we hadn't met before. But Kelly, she will chat you up, and so she was asking me all about what I write, and we got to know each other, and and then later that same conference, I did what they call a first page reading, where you take the first page of a manuscript and give it to someone at the conference. They have people who do audiobooks there, and so you give them basically your first page, and they'll read it kind of professionally in front of a crowd and kind of give feedback. So I took the first page of what then was a different title, but what is The Last Humans now, and had that read, and Kelly was in the audience for that, and afterwards she kind of talked to me and said, I'd love to read more of that. And at the time it was being considered elsewhere, so we didn't link up. It took us a little while to get to a point where it was free, and she had started up Cursed Dragon Ship at that point. And at that point she'd read some of my other stuff, my Unwilling Soul stuff, so she knew that I could write, and that she wouldn't have to do a lot of hand holding of me, which I think was an appeal for her. And I sent her the manuscript, and she read about half of it and said, I like what I read, but you need to cut 40,000 words out of this. And she's like, do you think you can do that? And I had no idea, and I was like, yep. Yep, I can do it. And internally and so I spent a couple months doing that and sent it back, and she said, I said, it's in your inbox. She said, great, I'll send you a contract. And I'm like, don't you want to read it? And she's like, I trust you.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, no, I love working with Kelly. She and I get along really well. Her editing style matches really well with my writing style, and she always gets what I'm going for. I sometimes have to explain it because I write convoluted stuff, but we vibe very well together.
You said something that absolutely terrifies me, the getting the contract and signing it because I trust you. I did that too. And let me just tell you, that does not always work out well at all. Most times that works out very, very terribly. So if you are a new writer, if you really know the person, that's
yeah,
it helps a little bit.
I should point out, I know at that point I'd interacted with Kelly a number of times. This was a couple years after we'd met, so we'd known each other for a while at that point. I knew other authors that worked with her and had nothing but good things to say. So this wasn't just yes, absolutely, that's an excellent point to bring up. Don't just sign any contract that gets shoved under your nose. Do your due diligence. In this case, in this case, I was very confident in who I was getting into business with,
right.
But if that's not always the case, and you should always prioritize making sure you're not getting into a bad deal.
There are some other interesting cases too. I know the first one that I signed, there's someone that I known for a while, had a great business. I knew a couple authors, and then right around when I signed on, they took on too many all of a sudden. Mm-hmm. So then there was, all the promises that were made were kind of in the toilet. Everybody kind of got left holding a bag. That happened to me twice with people that I had known. One was actually a pretty huge horror publishing company that just kind of fell apart. I think 2 years after I was in limbo with them, the whole company just closed overnight. So it was it can be really scary sometimes, man, out there. So it's really good to definitely make sure you know what you're getting into, and the trajectory of the business, how many authors they've got, how many authors their company can handle. So yeah, there's all these little things that go into that, man. It's insane.
I agree with Avatar Fan. Read your contract, do your research on the publisher. Like Kelly, I know I had known her when she was working with Inkling Publishing, and then she started Cursed Dragon Ship. So I've seen how good of a person she is and what she does to her authors.
It's awesome.
Yeah, and I probably didn't finish that story well, which is a bad sign as a writer. But when I said that I trust you, that was her saying to me, I will send you a contract despite not having read the new manuscript you just sent me. But just based on what I've seen of you as a writer in other contexts, I trust that you have delivered
the
what I
person who
asked
could have
for.
got burned there was her.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. She was the one taking a risk. And I was the
Gotcha,
one like,
okay.
are you sure? So he was like, yep. I was like, okay.
Well, that's a totally different story. Do that every time.
At Shadow Alley, they have a policy that they generally only are interested in series. So, you know, if you're not coming to them with 3 books, they're not interested.
Cursed
But
Dragon Ship is the same. Yeah.
you don't get a contract for book 1 until you're at least halfway through book 2, so that they understand that, you know, they're not going to sign up for something you're not going to finish.
Very nice.
And they generally won't make any more financial commitments, editing or cover, until you've completed book 2.
That
Very
makes
nice.
sense. I mean,
That is good to know.
Yeah, and that's just up front. Like, that's, you know, they're friendly with all their authors. A lot of their authors are people that they know socially, you know, through Superstars. But it's better to just keep that stuff right on, you know, keep that stuff up front.
I hope she hasn't regretted it.
Kelly does not seem to be regretting it.
No.
Greg is frozen.
Oh no. Okay, until Greg becomes unfrozen, let's continue with the other ideas. When it comes to is that? Yeah, I don't think it's on my end.
He's coming back.
Yes. Okay. Until then, let's D&D. How did you get started? Or was Kelly the first round you played? Kelly's D&D games.
Well, I started. I mean, I played D&D when I was in high school. That would be back in 2nd edition D&D. So, like, you know, back in the mid '80s. So that was, you know, back when a -2 armor class was a good thing, and you needed to know your Thaco, and so that was when I was playing D&D, and then I did not touch it again until Kelly asked me to join Cursed Dragon Ship. And
Hi, Dante.
I was really, really touched by that request, because I thought it would just be Cursed Dragon Ship authors, and it was nice of them to invite me in, even though I, you know, am not one. And then I brought in Jess, who was an enormous Jess Astra, who, you know, was really, her and Kevin were the two that really knew D&D well and kind of kept the rest of us straight. But that's how I got brought in, and that was so. It's my first time playing 5th edition. My first time playing anything resembling modern D&D. And when I played as a kid, I'm giving a long answer to try to give Greg time to come back.
Oh yeah.
When I played as a younger person, I didn't focus very much on role playing. The emphasis was not that much on story. It was way more about the combat and you know, the loot and stuff, which is fine. But I had a great time with Kelly's role playing focused approach. That was a lot of fun.
That rocks. What about you, Raz? When did you start?
I was 8. I started in 1991. Originally, I had some interest in the game. My dad worked for, it was sort of a machine company. They would go in and design entire warehouses and assembly lines for like major companies like Black & Decker and stuff like that. And he was in the drafting and design department. Well, him and his friends in that department spent all their time taking every game console at the time, which I think was all the Ataris, pretty much, NES, and taking all the code and translating it all to Commodore 64 discs. So,
oh wow!
From there on, they kind of noticed that I was kind of into the more fantasy games, and one of his friends at work ran D&D. I'm not going to name drop him or anything, but he was pretty far into the company in general, and knew a lot of people. You know, he knew Gary, just a lot of people that were involved. And so my dad's like, okay, this will be a great table for you to start at. My dad himself wasn't into the game at all. He really didn't play a lot of video games. So he got me with his friend at work. I sat down. I was the only kid at the table. Everyone else was in their 30s and up.
Yeah.
And within the first couple of weeks, I got so into it. It was AD&D, so I had to worry about Thaco. And luckily, I was fantastic at math. That helped a lot back then. And I just sort of never stopped playing it. I mean, it's probably been a few months since I played it now, but like it's the next game is always on the horizon. Either I'm running it or someone else is running it.
Welcome back, Greg.
Thank you.
So, Greg, how did you get started on D&D, and if Kelly wasn't your first round, how did you become part of the game?
She was my first round. I did some. I had friends in high school, and we did some D&D like games very casually. Like we basically just made up our own rules and ignored all the set rules, and we had a lot of fun doing that. In fact, that was kind of one of the early periods where I realized I enjoyed creating stories, because I always enjoyed when it was my turn to be. We would like rotate who was in charge of running the game. And whenever it was my turn, that was when it was the most fun, because I'd be like, hey, what I got to do to these guys now? Like, so that was probably, yeah, right. Yeah, probably an early warning sign. But, so yeah, but my first formal D&D game was with Curse Dragon Ship and Kelly and Dave, etc. And I had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That rocks.
I think
you picked a hard class to jump out of the gate with.
I did, and I also picked a character backstory that, as I've said before, upon playing the character, because he had this dark secret, and he was trying to keep this dark secret, and so the whole goal for him was to like try to behave as normally and uninterestingly as possible, which makes perfect sense from his perspective, but is super boring to watch.
What class did you start with?
A warlock, and his patron was real bad and had made him do really awful things. And so his main goal, he was basically a serial killer. And so his main goal was to not be discovered as this person. And it didn't take too long into the campaign before I'm like, this is more interesting as a written character than it is as a D&D character.
Yeah.
And if I had to do this over again, I would go a different route.
Yes.
One of our co-hosts here at the Allied Network, Dell, she's a big Warlock fan. Like most of her characters, she almost always goes Warlock.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Bard guy myself. I've been playing Bard since I was 8. I never looked back.
I'm doing a Bard in Baldur's Gate 3 right now. So
nice.
I'm hoping to pick that up when it drops for PlayStation.
Yeah. August 30th.
Yep.
You Dean Winchester Dolly in the game. That was interesting.
it was funny because I'm having all these back and forth conversations with Kelly, over DM in between sessions, being like, what are you going to let me do? Can I do this? Can I try to do that? And I was all set to like, my plan was to have the big reveal where my character is a bad dude, and then have him do the heinous thing, and then he becomes like the villain for the next season, and then I take a new character, and then we're actually going up against my old character as like who would be then controlled by Kelly as like an antagonist. But then Jess Astra as Dolly saw or like sympathized with.
She would not have it.
She wouldn't have it, and she like empathized with him, and like and it was like, and then she was messaging me like, I really think you should try like a redemption arc for him. And I'm just like, I just want to play this new character that I've come up with that would be so much easier than this one. But she talked me into keeping him around. So then we started the whole redemption arc of the character. So it was a very fun lesson in kind of collaborative storytelling and working with other people. And as an author, you're used to your characters more or less doing what you want them to do. They sometimes decide to go off and do things, that you weren't planning, but you can still, make them do things when they have to for purposes of the story. When you're playing a D&D game, obviously you might want the other players to do something, and they might go do something entirely different and totally mess up your plan.
Yeah.
You just have to roll with it.
Yeah, that is like the only storytelling outlet that I've seen that I've enjoyed so much, when you have so many people with so many different points of view, and then you're all like, hey, let's do this. And then you see it split in however many directions you have people.
Yeah.
Yes. everyone's like, follow me, and runs in 6 different directions,
Well, actually, what was interesting to me about the dynamics of Cursed Dragonship, the role playing, was no one wanted to be the leader.
Yes.
No, so it wasn't follow me. It was I'll follow you. Like no one wanted to be in charge.
Well, and I think
the captain just disappears randomly.
Yeah.
And I think Kevin Petway would have happily taken the leadership role, but he was scared, I think, based on his experience and personality, that he was going to just steamroll over everybody if he did that. So he kept trying to
kind of him. That's very Kevin Petway.
Yes.
To have that kind of empathy of like looking at it like I'd rather be the wizened scholar who's helping these, younglings find their way.
Yeah. And so he kind of he would sort of try to push things along when it wasn't moving.
Yeah.
I started learning to watch for that. If he started kind of trying to nudge it along, it was him sensing that we were bogging down a little too much. But yeah, it was funny. We did have a bunch of very meek players. I think not so much characters. Our characters weren't necessarily meek, but our players were, because we're a bunch of introverted writers who, don't always.
I found myself frustrated because I was trying to role play my character correctly, and yet I personally would, particularly from streaming so much, I'm aware of pacing.
Yeah.
And so the character wants to sit back and do nothing, but I'm like, we need to keep this moving along. Let's go. So.
And I was the same, because we talked about this even some off stream, and I'm like, I get you, but like the character I've written here wouldn't want to do this because he's trying to remain as low key as possible and not be sort of draw a lot of attention to himself. And like, I fully acknowledge this was a terrible idea, and I should not have done this as a character. And like I said, if I had my backup or my backup character, if I died, was going to be this ridiculously over the top warforged robot who was going to be like a constant quit machine. I was like, I'm going hardcore the other direction. This guy's just going to be everywhere all the time in everyone's face, and he's also going to be in my next book. So
that is exactly what I did with my second character. Was I tried to make my second character as much the opposite of my first character as possible. And
Kaz was a ton of fun. And Kaz was like a giant or a disaster-seeking missile.
I loved it. I loved being chaos. It was great.
Yeah.
She would have been the most perfect My Little Pony character ever. She would have fit in there.
Yep.
So
that is true, yeah.
I think the weirdest character I ever played, I was in a West March server. I'm not sure if you guys have done West March. It's like 50 plus people with rotating GMs. It's one world everybody's building together. You travel with different party members all the time. It's pretty crazy. And I was one of the admins in the server for like new players and new content creation. And we found all the original, this was like from a Dragon magazine, the original Bigfoot created race. So it was my job to take that and then translate the Bigfoot into 5th ed. So we paired that with a blood hunter. And when we went down to pick what kind of blood hunter we wanted to go with, there was the option of doing, of course, the werewolf blood hunter. But you didn't have to be a werewolf; you could be anything. So I literally played a Bigfoot land shark blood hunter, and that was probably the most insane shit I've ever done.
That's
it lasted for
insane.
I think 6 months. His name was Harry Henderson, of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, what else can you name him, right?
Exactly.
Another question that I have been curious about: what led you guys to having such wonderful? Sorry, I got distracted. Yes, nocturnal. I cannot say that. Nocturnal druid. I agree. Amazing. Your strong, willful female protagonists. Where did you get the or who gave you such great ideas to make them so multidimensional, so strong, and so just like, okay, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm gonna go full steam ahead?
Do you want to all right. I don't have a great answer for this because I honestly don't know. I have a theory, and that my theory is that when I think of a character to working on a character to be the center of the story, I'll sort of work them through several different modes of like, who is this person? Like I know kind of what their role is, but like trying to figure out who they are. And just generally speaking, if I think about the same character as a male or a female, it's usually more interesting to have them be a female. And maybe that's because traditionally so many protagonists have been male that it just feels like it's more done. Like we've done this before, I've seen this before, and I'm someone as a reader and a writer who I'm always looking. Show me something I haven't seen before, and I don't mean to imply that I haven't seen female protagonists before. I certainly have, but just I don't know. Like I have a character coming. My character Belle, the star of my new murder mystery series. She's a woman, and she's very crude and.
Oh no!
He's thinking a lot about his next word choice.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay. She's very crude. She hates authority. She's always like snarking at everybody. Every other word out of her mouth is an insult usually. And I'm like, if I make her a guy, she's just a giant jerk. But if for some reason, and maybe this just points to bias on my part, if she's a woman character, it just seems less abrasive to me. And more interesting. And so I don't know. That's my best answer, is that I think about these characters as that they could be a man or they could be a woman. And just generally speaking, most of them have been more interesting as female characters for me.
Yeah, I think that, there's certainly a big piece of that too. I get bored seeing the same thing over and over. And, what's interesting to me, the story you write has to be interesting to yourself first. And it's not interesting to me to write The Adventures of the Amazing White Guy because I've seen The Adventures of the Amazing White Guy 100 times already. So, that I don't necessarily sit down and say, okay, my main character is going to be female or my main character is going to be from this group or whatever. But I just look at what the options are and then who has the most interesting story to tell. My first draft of Under Everest had them switched. The main character of that was the white guy, was the war veteran white guy, and then he's got his sidekick Nima, the young Sherpa girl. And the more I wrote it, the more I'm like, this is not interesting. I've seen this. What it would be interesting is, what if she was the main character and he was her sidekick? And then I have to figure out, well, why would that happen? And then it gets interesting. So I think that's a piece of it. I also, for me, I feel like I'm just drawn to the outside, and I'm more connected from my own personal background to people who are on the wrong side of the power dynamic. And unfortunately, the world we live in, that is frequently women. And so I think it is interesting. It's not just interesting; it's satisfying, I guess, to write the underdog person in a position where they can, chart their own destiny.
And the fact that you researched the weather patterns of the mountains in the Alps and around Everest, and the people who had went up the mountain, those little pieces of all the little research you did before you started like fleshing out the story, that also blew my mind as I was reading through Everest. That was amazing.
Well, thank you. I am a big nut on mountaineering, and particularly Himalayan mountaineering history. So I could not read it if I got those kinds of details wrong, because it would bother me. So, and Greg and I, we were talking before the stream about the differences between Greg and I. One of the differences is Greg does not outline, and I outline to a ridiculous degree. And so, like, if I'm going to write a book, it takes me like a good month to get ready to write something because I'm going to spend, time outlining. Everest was months of research. After Everest, I said, I'm never writing in the real world again because there's just too much damn crap I have to get right.
I don't consider that, but I agree.
Yeah.
We're talking about how you had said you write the different scenes, and then after you wrote all the scenes that you had thought out, you go try to mesh them together into a whole story.
I do
beforehand.
that, yes. It gives everyone heartburn.
It's magic. I don't understand how that works at all.
Yeah.
Going back to your question, I think the way I do it's weird because I write a combination of short stories and novels. So a lot of my shorts are first person. So I don't really worry about gender at first. I don't worry about a lot of that. I tell the story, from this first person perspective. And as I go along, the person is talking about their experience, that they're in the action. And then if I get to the part in the story from the first person perspective, then I find it becomes important to know the gender, then I include it. Because the way I write is sort of like the no sleep creepypasta, first person where someone needs to feel like this is real. Like this could have happened in some way. Like a lot of the weird rules that they give us there on Reddit. So I don't want to gender the character because then that eliminates like an entire, multiple audiences for now they can't see themselves in this character. They can't see this happening.
Yeah.
So I tend to not do that with that. But then with the longer projects like the novels, I tell the story in pieces and like little files. Like I don't necessarily outline everything, but I outline major plot points and sections, and I always start with the antagonist. To me, I start with that, and then I figure out who the protagonists are.
Mhm.
So I need to know what the match is going to be because I don't know. I just like to make the bad guys first. That's what interests me the most. I hate stories that have a weak bad guy, and a lot of my favorite stories don't even have the greatest bad guys of all time. So like. I figure if I design that well enough first, then, they may not even have a gender. Sometimes it's Lovecraftian, and I don't have a need to be male, female, or anything in between. So I just kind of tell the story. But then if I need a female protagonist, I watched my grandma survive so many insane things. So I get to draw from a lot of her real life experiences. And then, we had the greatest female leads in the world in horror. We had Nancy from Friday, or I'm sorry, from Nightmare. We had Ripley from Alien. Like we had all these strong characters in horror and sci-fi to look up to kind of know how badass a woman can be while still staying, sensitive and in tune with herself and who she was as a person without being overshadowed by the males or the robots or anyone else. Yeah. So that's kind of where I go with that.
Yeah.
I Lovecraftian horror.
Yeah, that's my gender right there.
I think all the parts I remember reading this, that all the parts in Alien were written with no specific gender in mind, so that they could just cast whoever they wanted.
Yeah. I love that about it.
Yeah.
I cannot picture your trans-dimensional demon having any, like, human gender urges. That I think it all by itself is just scary.
Yeah.
It's odd because the creature and Sunset's Crimson identifies as male. There is no actual male in his species. He didn't know what gender was until he came into our world and saw that there were genders to try to find some way to connect himself to the world around him to understand it better. So he identified as male, but really still doesn't understand what that means at all. Has no real concept of what that actually means.
I didn't think he did at all.
That comes to play a little bit in the second, and then a lot more once you hit into the third book when actually finish writing 2 and 3.
Oh yeah, your turn-paced book. What got you interested in writing turn-based stories, Dave?
Well, I've always been a big fan of turn-based strategy games, going back to Civilization and XCOM and the originals back in the early 90s. And D&D is turn-based. I like the idea of stopping and thinking about what I'm going to do next. So when I became aware of the gamelit genre, gamelit is very interesting to me, but it primarily focuses, or at least at the time, on representations of MMO. So it was a lot of MMO. In fact, in many cases, it was literally people being pulled into online games. And I kept feeling like, well, I would really get into this if there was a turn-based one, because that's what I like to play. And I just kept thinking about it until it just kind of bounced around in my head for months and months until I was like, I think I know a way that would work. And then I started working on it. And then I talked to a few of Shadow Alley's authors, and I said, first off, does this work? Second off, has this already been done? And if it hasn't been done, is that because no one wants it? And after that, I just kind of built my pitch deck, and brought it to James Hunter, and he went for it.
Yeah.
So it's actually one of the things that is great about it is it makes action scene writing really, really easy. Because normally in action scenes, you have this kind of dance that you have to do where you want to kind of explain what's going on, but you don't want to just be a camera that follows everybody. So it's easy to lose track of who's doing what. But if it's turn-based, you're literally describing turns, so it becomes a lot easier.
Oh, yeah.
What I didn't count on, though, is how much it would expand the word count. So an outline that I thought would be like 85, 90,000 words ends up being 120,000 words because I'm doing all this ability description that I didn't used to have to do. You know, before you just hit a guy with a sword, now you're using hammer blow attack, and you have to describe what that is, and here are the numbers, and here's the lore text and everything. So it's like this takes up a lot more space.
The game menu basic edition, that adds a lot.
Yeah,
and some love it and some hate it.
I can totally see why people wouldn't like it. I am surprised at how popular the genre is, though.
I had not heard of it until I've actually read Dolly's, the Dollatress book. I had no idea what it was, and then you guys had introduced me to the style. So each person's one is different, and then being able to see like the D&D character compared to the real character. Yeah. Have you played any of the characters you've added in your book into any of your D&D games? Well, books, I should say, collectively. There's many. Have you added any of your D&D characters to your books?
I didn't add any of the characters from the Cursed Dragon Ship campaign into the books. I know Greg did.
I mean, before any D&D characters from before we've seen collectively as fans.
No, I don't think so. No.
Okay.
Everybody in One More Turn is new. I think Greg is frozen again already. He has an appropriate face too. I am, however, I'm trying to vamp to give Greg more time. Yes. I am taking some of my One More Turn characters and playing them in Baldur's Gate 3 on stream, and that's been fun.
And collectively, we have appreciated you adding your streams to the YouTube. That has helped sometimes, like explain from multiple different points of view of players of like Oblivion and such. That has teaching the younger players. So because you have a different way of seeing Oblivion than Josh does, and you were a safe person, I knew I could put on for my little ones. So
that's awesome. Mostly safe. I occasionally accidentally swear like F-bomb level, but I try not to.
That is okay. And apparently my kids are playing on my Xbox account right now. Sorry. The things keep popping up, so apparently they're online. So I know what they're doing. Pardon me. Raz, have you added any of your bards into your books or stories?
Yeah, I just did an anthology last year with Faycor. It was called Seeking Stories, and I finally took the bard I've had since my childhood that I've recreated in not even just D&D games, like so many different styles of RPGs and online video games. Seth Ridlock is he's a smartass. He's very similar to Captain Jack from Doctor Who and Torchwood. He's got that kind of, he'll do anything that moves kind of scenario if the mood catches him right. But he cares about his family, the people that he calls family, his friends. So getting to really put him into words and a location that I'm very familiar with was a lot of fun for me in that short story. And I've kind of gone back and talked to some people that I've gamed with over the years. The last year, I've actually, just as of last week, I got the final piece of permission I needed to bring a lot of their characters to life as well, along with Seth. So I think one of the biggest things that I'm going to be tackling once I finish the Mime trilogy, the Silence of the Crimson trilogy, is I'm going to start actually releasing the Seth books. And it's interesting because whereas all my strictly the more horror-leaning side of my speculative fiction is in Riverside, Ohio. The more fantasy side of my spec fiction is in Dayton, Ohio, which is just the neighboring city. So I'm going to get to do a little bit of crossover on down the road with some of the characters from more the horror side as I go along. But being able to tell that and and a larger scale is really exciting to me. He's a fun character to write. He's a lot of my personality, a lot of my smart-assness, so it's really easy to do. And I think my favorite moment in that story that I can't wait to continue on with is he meets a woman in a bar and she takes him out to his car. He's drunk as hell. She's kind of helping him stand. And, there's a scene where he basically just starts throwing really cheesy pickup lines at her. And then she laughs, he laughs, the car laughs. Wait, what? Turns out the car's a mimic. And the whole car is alive. He will, I think when the first book starts, he'll be the owner of the car. So that was kind of like a prequel, that little story. And there'll be another short story before I release the first novel in that series. But it's a lot of fun to combine that with the real world, because I read a lot of Dresden Files, Iron Druid, Vesic series by Eric Asher. So I really love the interactions with urban fantasy and with magic in the real world and all the different layers, all the new rules that you can make up that doesn't exist anywhere else. So I'm really excited to do that.
That answers my question about whether or not the mimic car is coming back.
Oh yeah, he's actually one of them. He's not a side character at all. He's a pretty big character in the series going forward.
That rocks. What type of stuff do you read, Dave?
Well, right now, not much. I have been so busy lately that it is hard to find time to read. When I can read, I'm trying to catch up on my other Shadow Alley authors. I need to catch up on Greg's stuff. Really, it's kind of embarrassing, but I feel like it's been a good year since I've really just sat down and just read something. It's just between the day job, writing, streaming, it's hard to find time to just sit down and do that. I think I've been starting to do more audio, and that really kind of helps me because I can do that while I do something else. So hopefully I'll catch up more that way.
How did DS9 become your favorite Star Trek series?
Well, I'm not sure that's not somewhat changing, because I'm really, really, really enjoying Strange New World.
Really good.
But Deep Space Nine, I think many writers that I've talked to seem to be bigger fans of Deep Space Nine than kind of the larger Star Trek community, even though I think it's getting its due now. It's a very character-focused show. Just by the nature of its being stationary. And my cheesy line that I've been saying for years is Next Generation used its characters to tell an interesting story. Deep Space Nine uses a story to tell you something interesting about the characters. Deep Space Nine is about the people, not this week's anomaly or whatever. And Next Gen was great. Don't get me wrong. I love it, but I care about the Deep Space Nine people more because I just know them better. So that's really why. And there's just a very deep world. It's got a lot of good world building in it as well.
I'm not allowed to say anything about Voyager, or my wife will kill me.
Voyager is such a frustrating show because I think on its best moments, Voyager is as good as any Star Trek has ever been.
Yeah.
And I think there's a few actors on that show that are as good as anybody there. it just has this weird, inconsistent tone writing to it.
That was kind of my issue with it, but she just loves Kate Mulgrew and Janeway so much. Like that's like her life right there.
I wouldn't argue with that.
Kirk is definitely my captain. As
Yep.
cheesy as it all was in the beginning, he's my captain. But I really enjoyed. I've seen every season of everything. I haven't seen anything but the first, I think 5 episodes of Strange New Worlds because I just finally started on that. Got to it this week. But oddly, I like Below Decks a lot.
I also really like Below Decks.
There's just something about that cartoon. It hit me, man.
It's funny because the thing that Below Decks reminds me of the most is Galaxy Quest.
Yes.
Because it is a thing that loves the thing it's gently making fun of.
Yep.
Lower Decks probably loves Star Trek more than any other Star Trek show.
Oh yeah, definitely. The writers of that show, man,
that just bleeds out of it, and yet the character, but it's true to itself. It doesn't make fun of itself, and it never makes its characters the punchline. And I really, really respect Lower Decks. I think it's really well done.
Oh yeah. When did you first become a fan of Long Dark, and how you got into it?
I started. Well, Greg is back, so if we want to talk to Greg, that's fine.
Before he dies again.
That sounds great.
I've done a full internet reset of the house.
Okay.
Yes.
Put a pin
I'm trying to remember what the list of questions how we got here. Like, what is your favorite Star Trek series?
Deep Space Nine.
Good man.
You did answer. Okay, you're also a Deep Space Nine fan. Why are you a DS9 fan? It's easier to say that today.
I really appreciated their willingness to go for the longer form, serialized stories, go deep with more characters, and explore. I have a terminal case of looking at utopian societies and being like, yeah, but what about this? Like, and they were willing to sort of go there and say, yeah, what's the flip side of this? You know, who loses out of this equation, and ask some of those questions. And I mean, later on in the series, you know, what happens if we go into a war that is like an existential threat to the Federation? Just how far will these characters go to ensure that the Federation survives, even if they have to compromise their own morals in the process?
Yes. It starts out showing who has lost with just the captain scene, Captain Sisko. So yeah, you go from that and you go into learning about each character. And I loved how it was more, we're here, this is our life, we're going to live it here no matter what happens. And then you add some fan favorites and it just gets more interesting.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
The other question I asked you had answered earlier about Mr. Fault. Okay.
Sorry, I really apologize for disrupting the whole thing.
I'm not mad at you. I understand internet issues. I was just so happy you agreed to come on. One of the other questions, do you play Long Dark, or do you have a game that you're just like in love with, but you also love the community?
Well,
I don't play Long Dark. I don't do a ton of survival games. The one exception to that was I played all the way through Subnautica Below Zero. I played a fair bit of Subnautica too, the original, and I really enjoyed that. But I don't do a ton of I don't do a ton of game. My game community is Dave and his community that he has built up around his people. As far as my games I'm in love with, my all-time favorite game is Horizon Zero Dawn. The whole Horizon series really very, very much hits like everything I like about a story, and just the especially the constantly sort of slowly unfolding mystery of it. And that's the phrase that will always get my attention is just like everything is not what it seems, and that's definitely one of those stories where that's the case. And if you pitch me a story in which everything is not as it seems, you will at least get me to take an interest.
Oh yeah.
I have to admit, I own The Long Dark and have not yet played it. I've been wanting to very badly. I'm into survival games, but I got really hurt by one, Just Survive. I got really into that game. It was probably one of my favorite games of all time, and then Daybreak sold it, shut down the servers.
Oh wow.
They keep promising to come back for like the last 4 or 5 years. They keep saying we sold it, it's coming back. But I've been trying to hold off and like gather some. So I gathered Long Dark. There's a couple there I've bought already just when I get my courage back up to play a game again. Because I noticed that Long Dark hadn't finished being made yet. Last I looked at it a couple weeks ago, they said there was still an episode that they were working on, I guess.
That's for the story mode portion.
Yeah.
The survival mode, which is I think the majority of the players, that's more what their focus is on. That one's done.
So it's safe to just go ahead and jump in?
It is definitely safe to jump in, yes.
Oh,
So I'll have to do that this week then. I got it on PlayStation.
Yeah.
But I've been playing the crap out of Frostpunk. That's probably oddly...
Frostpunk is great.
It's one of my favorite games ever
Yeah.
made, and I just keep replaying it over and over. And I made myself like kind of slow down a little bit because I got so into all the scenarios. So I only let myself buy one of the DLCs when they all first came out. And I just finally got to buy the last DLC they made just a couple weeks ago. So I'm about to start that here soon. So I had to pace myself knowing that the second one wasn't ready yet. But then last year they announced this thing that if you, I forget which country it was, if you wanted to get tickets to fly to this country and put yourself up, they would let you play the in-house beta.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't realize it was out of country, so I signed up and got selected and got notified, and I'm like,
Oh no.
I made it home.
Now I need tickets to Borneo. How do I get them?
Right. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I haven't played The Long Dark, but I've watched Dave and others play it lots, and it's a fantastic community. I can tell that even from watching from the outside. They're very welcoming and supportive, and
Yes, extremely.
yeah.
shout out to everybody in the DH Dunn community. You guys are amazing.
Oh,
You guys are always friendly. You guys are always kind, and I have appreciated seeing you guys. Even when I'm just lurking and just have them on for something for Dante to babble at, you guys have been amazing.
Well,
And
that's credit to them. They're the ones who make it that way.
And we do very much enjoy listening and watching you play, Dave. So
Well, thank you.
for that.
I enjoy playing, so it's good. It's a good match. But yeah, I mean, the Twitch thing is such a neat. It's like running a bar, and that's how I look at it. And it's just the bar is only great if everybody who comes in is great. And so my job is to just keep them entertained, so they keep coming in. And so it's been awesome, and it's great to have you. And I have my Everest pup from Dante behind me, and I have my drawings in the pre-roll, and I'm just honored that anybody would take the time to do something like that. It's very kind.
And we have appreciated you, and you guys have both given escapes from very interesting and not always the funnest situations.
Yeah, it's been a weird couple of years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I watched Dave in his very early streaming days of Darkest Dungeon, and that was a nice escape for me. Just watching him,
That one.
just sort of chatter on to nobody, because there weren't a whole ton of people tuning in at that point.
That was it.
It was you're pretty much talking to me after a
I
while.
was talking to you or talking to myself. That was it.
Yeah, and but I really enjoyed that, and I don't get to drop by nearly as much these days because I'm super busy. In a good way, I'm writing way more than I was then. But
Writing is good.
You're very much a presence on the channel, even when you're not there.
Oh, it was so funny when I logged in for Burbathon, and a couple of the people were like, "Oh my God, it's Greg! Oh my God!" They're just like,
"We've
"Whoa,
heard of this guy. We've never seen him."
Yeah, he's real.
Wow, he is real. Yeah, exactly. I thought his name was Gerd.
Yeah, right. It was very funny to walk into this. So I have to keep my visits infrequent so that I get maximum impact when I do magically appear like a unicorn, or the Loch Ness monster. It's like, oh my god, did you see him?
You are probably one of the darker unicorns in my life, and I can't find a reason to have a problem with that because
Dave's community manages to keep being a light and welcoming place despite the fact that I come in and start chucking grenades every which way. So
yes. Or your weird creatures coming from the magical forest and swamp. Yeah, that's not fun at all.
Yeah, I like my creepy crawlies. What can I say?
I wondered about the hat too, Corey. I don't know why Greg doesn't have his hat on.
Oh, the hat. Yeah, I honestly, I was running a bit behind today, so I did not put on the
Can
outfit.
you get the headset over the hat?
No, that's kind of why I didn't do it, because it's a more complicated operation. I have to plug in separate earbuds and a microphone, and then just have the hat on. It's like several more steps, and I was running late, so I apologize. I do usually wear a hat when I do author stuff, but I don't have it on today.
Even with your internet, you kept coming back, and I appreciate that. It's just ever since Raz and Dell agreed to the 2-person format or 2 or more person format, I'm like, I gotta get Greg. I gotta get Dave.
I feel like I only gave you half a show, so I feel bad. We'll have to do something else to make up for it. Because
we have a lot of great shows on the network. We have the Allied Society, which is dedicated to authors and pretty much anybody just getting together and sharing either urban legend campfire based stories, like something you wrote, like something you heard from your cousin's nephew's uncle's brother, all kinds of different things like that. We just get around and have a good time. But we have a lot of different shows.
Cool.
So many different things that we do all the time.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, if you want, I can send you guys an invite next time we do Allied Society. And if you guys want to join and tell one of your short stories or an experience or whatever, you're welcome.
Sure.
Yeah, you guys are fun to hang out with, and I've enjoyed it for the times where I wasn't raging at the internet off screen. Storm out of shout to my wife. Did the internet go out for you too? She's like, "Yep." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm resetting it."
That I understand. And then I just asked Greg, I asked Dave some questions that I'd actually been wondering and haven't asked on air. And he's like, yeah, sure. This is why, or this is how I see it. Or yeah. So,
lots. Dave is always good for nuggets of wisdom.
I'm never short of something to say.
What is the one story you've read at any point in your life that has scared you the most?
I have an answer if Dave.
I'm thinking because I'm like, there's a couple that I can think of.
I don't think I could pick a single one, but N by Stephen King. It's a novella, and it is a depiction of obsessive compulsive disorder as cosmic horror, and it's very terrifying. And I was driving in the car listening to it on audio for the first time, and it was like a stormy day in the fall. It was like the perfect mood to set the scene. And just very, if you have even the slightest tendency towards obsessive thoughts or compulsive behavior, even just a bare minimum, that will get under your skin.
Yeah,
it's a terrifying story.
I will go to Stephen King as well. Thanks for coming in, Koru. Great to see you.
Thanks, Koru.
I think I would say Pet Sematary. Really, because there's I've read pretty much all the Stephen King stuff, and I was going to say Night Shift, because there's a lot of short stories in Night Shift that really creep me the hell out. But Pet Sematary is unique, I think, in that even though it's supernatural like the rest of Stephen King stories, I just found it's one of those stories where you can watch someone destroy themselves, and you can see it happening. And you know they're going to do it, and you know why they're going to do it, and you think, well, I would do this too, and and yet what parents wouldn't go to any length to try to save their kid, you get it, and so that makes it even worse. And it makes it even worse when you're like, oh, and it goes terrible, just like I knew it would. So, I mean, to me, it's the ground level of his stuff is what makes it scary. That is, all his people are regular schmucks like me.
He does a really good job of grounding his characters and grounding the circumstances in believable, realistic characters. He's good at sort of giving them believable quirks and little aspects of their personality that make them feel not non-stereotypical and actually like lived in real people.
Yeah, because the problem with a lot of horror, bad horror, is it requires its main characters to be stupid.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I'm starting like being more picky and finding the more fleshed out, the more intelligent characters that are trying their best to get out of the situation or just deal with the bad situation at hand, because sometimes it's not a situation you can leave.
Yeah.
But how does one deal with it? How does one actually intelligently think through the situation when none of it makes any sense at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a basic element of horror, right? Is there has to be some reason they can't just walk away. Whether they're trapped physically, like they literally can't get out of wherever they are, or whether there's someone they have to save, or there's got to be some reason they can't just turn around and flee what's trying to get them, whatever kind of horror it is.
Definitely.
So
I like that you guys mentioned Stephen King. I read a lot of King, man. The thing that gets me the most with any trope in horror is small town horror. That's sort of like where I'm at, because I grew up in a small town. I write about the small town mostly. So anytime I get to read anything like that, and it was the one for me. Not the ending, of course. I don't know a lot of people that particularly love the ending of that book, including Stephen King himself. But the whole build and the setup of that, and then there's another series. Oh my God, I'll mention it in a second because my brain just completely died on itself and I've forgotten the name of the book. But I know Dan Simmons wrote it. That's as much as I know at the moment.
I don't think I've read any of his or remember reading.
I remembered. Summer of Night.
It's
It's very Stephen King-ish as far as the small town coming of age, but it's about a school that all these creatures and monsters and things come out of that they have to fight. And it's got a better ending than it. So
Stephen King is the master of all build-up and no payoff.
Stephen King's interesting because from my understanding, he's a true pantser, and that he does not know where the story will end when he sits down to write it, and that means that his stories can have a very organic feel because he's sort of creating them as he goes. It can, in certain circumstances, result in problems with the ending.
I was talking about this almost verbatim on stream last night. I was comparing your writing style to mine, and that not saying that you have bad endings. That's because you don't. But that the challenge of pantsing, the gift of pantsing is how organic everything is. Nothing feels railroaded. Nothing feels like, oh, they're doing this because the plot needs them to do it. The challenge of pantsing is it's not necessarily leading you anywhere because you didn't know where you were going when you started. So it's harder to arrive at that emotional payoff that everything lines up exactly perfectly because you weren't constructing it in the beginning.
And I agree with that. And I'm not a true pantser in that sense, or in the Stephen King sense. My two requirements for starting a story are I need to know the beginning, I need to know the ending. Now, how I get between those 2 points is up for grabs. But and there's a lot of writing myself into blind corners and backing out and trying a different thing. And I end up cutting out of every draft a decent amount of words that just ended up going nowhere. And that's just part of my process. But
I think you and I have talked about this too, that, if you outline to a decent level of detail, you're kind of pantsing first. You're still doing it.
Yeah, it's more about I mean, Kelly likes to say that pantsers, their first draft is the outline, basically. Like it's a really long, it's a book length outline, essentially, and it's them figuring out the outline. And so it's more like when and how you want to outline than it is whether or not you do. And we're just sort of doing it the hard way. But
Because I think if you sat down and got a bunch of outline writers and said, okay, and did it end up like that? Most of them are going to go, well, not exactly.
Yeah.
Because once you start writing, sometimes it looks great in the outline, and then you start writing, you're like, nope, this isn't it. This is not right. The characters wouldn't do this. I know them now. I didn't know them when I started writing the outline, but now I know them, and they're not going to do that.
I did this thing a while ago where plancing, I guess is what I'm going to call it today, or somewhere kind of in the middle, where my outline for each chapter was one sentence. That's all I allowed it to be, just one sentence for each chapter, and then the whole thing was pants from there.
Yeah, that's actually a good process. I think that's very good.
Dude, this is a lot of good ways to learn from, because I had never actually thought about. The way I've been thinking for my stories, I've thought about how the houses look, what type of characters are in the house, because I've started from the setting first. Where is it taking place? What is initially there before the characters come in? And then from there, I've built the story around that and what can happen with each like chapter or short story or whatever's around the basic organic place that is there first. And I don't know if anybody else does it that way.
I think everyone has some slightly different version of how they do it.
Yeah, and the important thing is to figure out what works for you versus what some other person tells you is the right way to do it. And importantly, it's what you can keep doing consistently. That goes for your process as well as how much you write in a given day or week or whatever your denomination of time is. I've in the past, I can put out huge amounts of words per day for a little while, and then I hit the wall and I don't write again for like a month. And so like it's taken me a little while to zero in on like what is this pace I can sustain basically indefinitely.
I think I use NaNoWriMo for a lot of content, and like just that 1 month it happens in November. I think one day I wrote, it was almost 28,000 words, and that whole day was me. I probably smoked like 6 packs of cigarettes, a copious amount of greenery, and ate a lot of bacon beef jerky, and had Mountain Dew, and just sat here. My wife did not speak to me. Kids did not speak to me. No one was allowed in unless they needed to show up and just hand me something I didn't have at my desk. And I just, phone was off. Every form of communication distraction was just off. And I've only been able to do that once my entire life, that many words. Usually my best day is usually maybe like a 4,000, 5,000 word day at best. And then I'm dead after November for like, until like January. I don't want to look at a page. Like
that's the thing for me is that like I can do it, but I actually probably lose time in the long run because I end up if I just written at a more steady pace, consistently, I'd probably get more done over the same amount of time. Now sometimes you have a deadline and you just have to hit the word count, and you know you just do it and you worry about after, but it's not ideal obviously to push that hard.
I, to be honest, Avatar fan, I half the time don't even think about there being a moral to any of the things I'm writing. I haven't thought about what meaning until after I wrote it could be gotten from it, because most of the time I'm just trying to figure out why it's in my head and put it on paper. Do you guys ever start out with an idea of moral of what they're supposed to be getting out of it?
I have kind of a theme that I think the plot is screaming, but sometimes that changes while I'm writing it, and it will end up, kind of either gaining another theme. But I don't know that I ever want someone to walk away from a book and say, this is what I learned from it, because it's always about the character for me. And, how is this person, how is he or she different at the end, and why? And, that's usually going to be more of an emotional change. So that will be, whatever emotional change that is, whatever lesson they learned, I guess is what, I remember, who the hell is this? the guy I saw at Superstars who said that basically a character arc is you have to figure out the lie the character believes, and then they have to learn that that lie is not true, and that's the story.
That makes perfect sense. No stereotypes.
Yeah, Avatar. That's obviously there's in that case you definitely want to have everything sort of geared in that regard. And if you're attempting to accomplish a specific goal with your writing, then everything about the story needs to be in support of that goal, and that's something you need to know going in for sure. I'm similar to Dave in that I have generally a theme, some aspect of usually of human nature, or people's behavior that I want to kind of explore, and I tend to, and then kind of like sounds similar to what Dave does in writing it, depending on how the story's going, that might shift some. Sometimes you'll figure out something. Yeah, and absolutely. And yeah, if you're writing with a specific end goal like that in mind, then it can probably be really helpful in some ways because it gives you that very concrete, this is what I want every aspect of the story to be sort of driving at. Otherwise, if you're not as concrete in your thematics, you can have to be careful it doesn't get too mushy if you want, or maybe you want it to be. Maybe you want there to be multiple takeaways, multiple people being able to look at your book and take something different away. And one thing you always learn or eventually learn is that you can be as completely screamingly obvious as you possibly can imagine, and someone will read that and take away something completely different than what you intended.
And no matter how hard you try to make two characters unshippable, someone will ship them together.
That is also true.
100% of the time.
That's a super interesting question, though, like with the moral aspect or writing towards that. I think with me, I don't do that a lot of the time. I'm in the same boat as you guys, especially when I write the short stories. It's just I have a theme, I have an idea. I've got I'm going to do a monster under the bed story today, but how can I mess with tropes and do it differently and be satisfied and enjoy my own experience while I'm writing it? But then I've got the Silence Crimson series where, on the surface, it's a quick fun read. It's just a dark comedy Lovecraftian slasher flick as a book. That's what those books kind of feel like. But this character that's possessed by this Lovecraftian creature, the whole concept and the premise I wanted to tell from the first day I started writing, my brother suffered severely from a lot of different mental debilitating issues. And one of them was multiple personality disorder. So what I wanted to do the entire time from beginning to end, all through 3 books, was to kind of get an outside perspective and an inside perspective on what multiple personality disorder was and how it's viewed by people and how people that suffer from it react to it when they finally recognize that they have it. So it's sort of like a social commentary on what that means in the world. So it's sort of like a double thing. You read it the first time with the fun, people are dying, there's humor, and then you get to the point where you start to realize, oh, wait a minute. And then you kind of almost have to go back and read it again with a completely different lens, because once you get that, it's a completely different book altogether. So I've been kind of trying to, I guess, juxtapose the different versions of what I'm writing and blend them seamlessly as I go. But I think that's only going to be with that trilogy. I think everything else is just going to be, writing what I think I need to write.
Well, that's the beauty of writing, right? Is you can make it do almost anything you want.
Right.
If you want it to very, very specifically target one aspect of the human experience, you can do that. And if you want it to be more broad and interpretable, you can do that too. So.
Okay, gentlemen, I know we collectively have enjoyed speaking with you, and this has been definitely a dream come true, having 3 very amazing authors together on the same show with me. And how about we end the show with you telling our wonderful people where to find you and one of your favorite quotes that you've heard. And I guess let's start with Dave.
Sure. So best place to find my stuff is just at dhdunn.com. There's links for everything there. And if you want to see me on Twitch, I'm at twitch.tv/DHDunn. YouTube, I think I'm at DH Dunn, maybe. But yeah, and as far as favorite quotes go, I think my favorite quote is, and I brought this up recently too on stream, is a Maya Angelou quote, which is, people will not always remember what you said or what you did, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And I think that applies to writing as well. I think that even after they've forgotten a lot of the details of a book, they will remember how the story made them feel.
That is awesome. Greg.
I am at gregorydlittle.com, just my name spelled out there. And that's got links to everything you can find. If you want to read epic fantasy, Unwilling Souls is available widely. If you want to read some sci-fi horror, Mutagen Deception is available. It's an Amazon exclusive, but that means you can get it on Kindle Unlimited. It's also on Audible. And starting next year, I'll have my murder mystery comedy sci-fi everything else you can imagine series. Looking forward to that. As far as favorite quote, I can think of a lot, but there's a lot of my stories examine human perception and the fallibility thereof. So I will go with a quote that I really love from a book by Peter Watts called Blind Sight. And the quote is, I might get the exact wording wrong, but the quote is, the human brain is a survival engine, not a truth-telling machine.
Mm.
That is awesome too. Definitely interested in your favorite quote.
Oh, that changes all the time. You can find me the most easily at Rasty Slasher, but I'm the only Rasty Slasher in the world, so you can just type it into a search engine. Jenny has set up so many social media profiles in places that I don't even know exist, so your best bet is to just type it in and surf around a little bit. My favorite quote today, because it changes that frequently, is going to be something that David Wong, a.k.a. Jason Peregrine, wrote, and John dies at the end. It's scientists talk about dark matter, the invisible, mysterious substance that occupies the space between stars. Dark matter makes up 99.99% of the universe, and they don't know what it is. Well, I do. It's apathy. That's the truth of it. Pile together everything we know and care about in the universe, and it'll still be nothing more than a tiny speck in the middle of a vast black ocean of who gives a fuck.
That is great too.
We're covering the spectrum here of favorite quotes.
Okay, me, my Friday Blue and the Disorganized Library and the Blue Box is my group. The page is Friday's Library in the Blue Box or with the Blue Box. Like, my brain is just not working today. And of course, the Owlite Society, which the Owlite Network that we are running on Twitch, where all our commenters are on today. And recently, I was overwhelmed, not sure how I was going to move forward, and trying to find the way to get through past the situation. And the thing is, I went back to one of the my favorite passages in Under Everest, and I want to share it with you guys because it made perfect sense. Trying to stay ahead of the cracks of everything that felt like it was trying to fall down around me. Nima could feel the ice breaking underneath her feet, darkness waiting to swallow them all. She would have to be one step faster than the cracks. We were able to figure out how to get to a better situation and to get where there was no cracks and no ice, it felt like. So always remember, keep going, and there is a way to get in a better place.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm honored that helped you. That's amazing.
That's great. I love that.
Yeah.
Yes, and I love Nima. And
I also love Nima.
Yes, I know.
Everyone loves Nima.
There's so much Nima, and we are so grateful. And I want to thank you all for giving us great characters and great places to go hide in the hardest of times and help us figure out how to think through the hard parts of life. And I would like to thank our wonderful, amazing audience that, well, is very obviously here because we got a Dave and a Greg. And I thank you guys for giving us the wonderful time of joining us. Everybody have a wonderful night. Thank you for coming. Bye.
See you
Bye.
soon.
Bye-bye. Thank you.